The sound of clashing steel echoed through the plaza, drowning out the cries of the wounded. In the chaos, a figure stood tall, his golden armor reflecting the dying light of the sun. Atahualpa, the mighty Inca emperor, held captive by men who would soon change the fate of the Andes forever. The air was thick with the tension of 1,000 soldiers, both Andean and Spanish, caught in a battle that would seal the destiny of the greatest empire in the Americas. It was November 1532. A mere 168 Spanish conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, stood on the cusp of obliterating an empire that had ruled over 10 million souls. But this was not just a war of armies. It was a clash of worlds, one steeped in divine kingship, ancient rituals, and unimaginable wealth, and the other armed with fire and steel, bearing the banner of a distant European crown. Atahualpa, defiant yet unaware of the full extent of the deception around him, was about to face the greatest challenge his empire had ever known. Beneath the surface, the cracks were already showing. The Inca Empire, once a beacon of military brilliance and divine authority, was crumbling under its own weight. The empire was not only facing foreign invaders, but an internal struggle between its greatest leaders, torn by civil war. This was a critical moment, one that would decide the fate of the Andes and the legacy of the Inca people. Hey there, I'm glad you're here. But let me ask you, how many incredible stories have you missed just by scrolling past? You've already found your way here, so why not dive deeper? Don't leave this page without uncovering the full picture. Hit that like button and subscribe, because the story you're about to hear deserves to be shared. Don't let this moment slip away. What makes the Inca Empire one of the most fascinating civilizations in history is not just the power it once wielded, or the grandiose monuments that remain as silent witnesses to its glory. The Inca Empire was, at its heart, a testament to human adaptability, ingenuity, and ambition, qualities that allowed a small, isolated tribe to rise to the pinnacle of power in the highlands of South America and stretch their dominion across the Andean region. The story of the Inca, however, is not a tale born of simplicity or fortune. It is a saga rooted in extraordinary cultural and technological innovation, driven by an unwavering belief in divine right, and marked by a fate shaped by their own greatness and the arrival of a foreign force they could neither comprehend nor withstand. The origins of the Inca are shrouded in the veils of legend, passed down through generations as the foundation for their claim to power. In the 12th century AD, the Inca were not the mighty empire they would eventually become, but a small tribe in the valley of Cusco, nestled high in the Andes at over 11,000 feet above sea level. The region was one of stark contrasts, fertile valleys that nurtured life, surrounded by harsh, towering peaks that made survival a constant challenge. Yet, it was precisely in this environment that the Inca began to distinguish themselves, though they were initially one among many other ethnic groups struggling for control in the Andes. Manco Capac, the legendary first ruler of the Inca, was believed to have emerged from Lake Titicaca, sent by the sun god Inti to bring order to the Andean world. His journey led him and his sister wife, Mama Oclo, to the fertile lands of the Cusco Valley, where the soil was rich and the potential for growth immense. As the myth tells it, the golden staff Manco Capac carried sank into the earth, signaling the perfect place for the founding of a new society. While this story is woven with supernatural elements, it symbolizes the divine connection the Inca people felt with their land. The Inca viewed themselves as the chosen children of the sun, with Manco Capac as their earthly representative, a belief that would solidify the role the Inca, while small in number, possessed remarkable foresight. They knew that survival in the unforgiving highlands depended on more than sheer strength. It required innovation. As early as 5000 BC, long before the emergence of the Inca as a dominant force, the Andean people had begun experimenting with agriculture. They learned to cultivate the hardy potato, a crop capable of thriving in the high altitudes where little else could survive. This agricultural revolution allowed the Inca to build the very foundation of their empire, a reliable food source that would sustain their people and fuel their expansion. In their valleys, the Inca developed a sophisticated system of agriculture, using terraces to carve out plots of arable land on steep mountain slopes. These terraces, many of which still stand today as a testament to their ingenuity, allowed the Inca to grow crops in different ecological zones, from the high-altitude potatoes to the maize and coca leaves of the lower valleys. They also mastered the art of irrigation, constructing canals that carried water to crops in arid regions, ensuring that the empire's agricultural needs were met. This ability to, by the early 15th century, the Inca were no longer a small tribe in the Cusco Valley. Under the leadership of Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, a name meaning "he who remakes the world," the Inca began a campaign of conquest that would transform them into one of the largest empires in the world. Pachacuti's rise to power began in 1438 AD, following the victory over the Chanca people, a rival group that threatened the stability of Cusco. This victory was not only a military triumph, but a symbolic moment. Pachacuti had not only saved his city, but had positioned himself as the rightful ruler of a growing kingdom. Pachacuti's military campaigns were characterized by a strategic blend of diplomacy and force. Rather than simply conquering through brute strength, the Inca offered defeated foes the chance to join their empire. Those who resisted were subjected to swift and decisive action. Through these campaigns, the Inca gradually extended their control over vast swathes of land, from the high-altitude regions of present-day Ecuador to the southern deserts of Chile. By 1500 AD, the Inca Empire, known as Tawantinsuyu, was the largest indigenous empire in the Western Hemisphere, stretching over 2,100 miles from north to south. What truly set the Inca apart from other civilizations was their ability to govern a vast and diverse empire without the use of written language or advanced military technology. Instead, the Inca relied on a highly organized system of administration built around a centralized bureaucracy that oversaw everything from resource distribution to the movement of armies. At the heart of this system was the Sapa Inca, the emperor, who was considered the direct descendant of Inti. His divine right to rule was unquestioned, and his word was law. Below the Sapa Inca was a hierarchy of officials who managed the empire's day-to-day affairs. The empire was divided into 4 regions, or suyus, each overseen by a governor. These governors, often from the royal family or military elite, were responsible for collecting tribute, organizing labor, and ensuring that local populations remained loyal to Cusco. This hierarchical system was reinforced by the mita, a labor tax that required all able-bodied citizens to contribute to state projects, whether in agriculture, construction, or military service. The emitia ensured that the state could mobilize vast resources for public works, from the construction of roads and bridges to the building of monumental structures such as Machu Picchu, the sacred city nestled high in the mountains. The Inca were not only brilliant administrators and military tacticians. They were also master builders, artists, and spiritual leaders. The grandeur of Inca architecture is still visible today in the remnants of their cities, such as the capital of Cusco and the iconic Machu Picchu. The Inca used advanced engineering techniques, such as precisely cut stonework, to create buildings that would withstand earthquakes, an essential feature in a region prone to seismic activity. Inca society was also marked by a deep spirituality, with an intricate relationship between religion and governance. The Inca believed that their rulers were not merely political leaders, but divine figures whose power was derived directly from the gods. Temples dedicated to Inti, the sun god, and Pachamama, the earth goddess, were built at strategic locations across the empire. These temples were not only places of worship, but also served as symbols of the emperor's divine right to rule. Yet, despite their incredible achievements, the Inca were not immune to the forces of history. By the early 16th century, a new and unforeseen challenge emerged: the arrival of Spanish conquistadors. Led by Francisco Pizarro, a mere 168 men confronted an empire of millions. With superior weaponry, horses, and the deadly effects of disease, the Spanish swiftly dismantled the Inca Empire. Atahualpa, the last Inca emperor, was captured in 1532 and executed by the Spanish, marking the end of a civilization that had ruled the Andes for centuries. The fall of the Inca Empire was not just the collapse of a political entity, it was the destruction of a world that had been built upon ingenuity, belief, and a profound connection to the land. Yet, even in their defeat, the Inca left behind a legacy that would endure. The agricultural techniques they perfected, the roads they built, and the cultural practices they left behind continue to shape the lives of millions of people in the Andes today. The story of the Inca Empire is a tale of extraordinary rise and tragic fall, marked by a series of achievements that would change the world. The Inca were not merely conquerors, they were builders, innovators, and dreamers who shaped a civilization that, even in its collapse, continues to captivate and inspire. Through their story, we are reminded of the enduring power of human creativity, resilience, and the quest to leave a lasting mark on the world. The story of human settlement in the Andes begins in the shadow of ancient glaciers, when the world was still finding its footing after the last ice age. It was here, in the highlands of South America, where the first tentative footsteps of human beings echoed through the vast, wild expanse of mountains and valleys. The Andes were no place for the faint of heart. With peaks soaring up to 20,000 feet and valleys carved deep by glaciers, this rugged land presented challenges that would seem insurmountable. Yet, for those early wanderers, the Andean highlands would become home, albeit one that demanded ingenuity, resilience, and an understanding of the delicate balance between nature and survival. As early as 15,000 BC, humans began to carve out their existence in this harsh environment. They were not yet the mighty Inca, or even the great cultures that would eventually follow. They were nomadic hunter-gatherers, moving from place to place, relying on the rhythms of nature to sustain them. The landscape, with its dizzying altitudes and temperamental weather, was a harsh teacher. The highlands could be freezing one moment, scorching the next. Yet, it was here that the first human interaction with the land occurred, an interaction that would eventually lay the foundation for one of the most complex and awe-inspiring empires the world had ever seen. These early people were, at first, largely dependent on hunting and gathering. They hunted game such as camelids, like the guanaco, and gathered plants that could withstand the high-altitude climate. But over time, they began to develop a profound relationship with the land, not just taking from it, but beginning to shape it, to coax it into providing more than it naturally would. Archaeological findings from sites such as Puconcha reveal the first signs of human ingenuity. The tools left behind, crafted with precision from flint and obsidian, tell a story of survival and adaptation. These tools, though simple, were essential for processing food, hunting, and preparing for the challenges of the high Andes. They were a testament to early human creativity and the desire to master their environment, not just survive in it. As the millennia passed, these early settlers gradually shifted from purely hunting and gathering to a more settled existence, marking one of the most significant transitions in human history. Around 10,000 BC, we begin to see the first signs of agriculture taking root. The land, once seen merely as a source of sustenance, became something that could be tamed and cultivated. The domestication of plants like the potato, quinoa, and later maize marked the dawn of a new era. These crops were well suited to the extreme conditions of the Andean highlands, and they would prove to be the cornerstone of the future Andean empires. The potato, for example, became the staple crop of the region, capable of surviving in the frigid mountain climates. The quinoa, rich in protein and adaptable to various altitudes, would sustain generations. The rise of agriculture brought with it a seismic shift in the way these early Andean societies organized themselves. No longer did they need to constantly move in search of food. Instead, they began to settle in one place, building the first permanent structures, small, circular dwellings made from stone and wood. These early settlements were modest, but they were the beginning of something much greater. The evidence of early agriculture can be seen in the terraces of Pachacuti, dating back to around 500 BC. These terraces, built into the steep mountain slopes, allowed for the cultivation of crops where none had been grown before. The people of the Andes, with their deep knowledge of the land, began to harness the very mountains themselves, creating an agricultural system that was not just innovative, but sustainable in one of the harshest climates on Earth. By 3000 BC, the Chavin culture began to emerge in the central Andes, signaling the first true step toward complex Andean civilization. The Chavin people, with their advanced agricultural techniques, not only grew crops, but developed intricate irrigation systems to channel water from mountain streams to their fields. They were the first to master the art of water management, an innovation that would be passed down through generations and refined by later cultures, including the Inca. But it wasn't just their agricultural achievements that marked them as innovators. The Chavin were also skilled artisans, creating beautiful pottery and textiles that reflected their deep religious and cultural beliefs. Their society was a tapestry of spiritual, agricultural, and technological advancements, each piece contributing to the foundation upon which future civilizations would be built. The process of settling, building, and cultivating the land was slow and deliberate, unfolding over thousands of years. Each generation of Andean people left behind a legacy of adaptation. Whether it was the creation of new farming techniques, the construction of irrigation systems, or the cultivation of hardy crops, these early societies were not just surviving, they were thriving, learning from the land and evolving with each passing century. They laid the groundwork for future Andean civilizations to build upon. When the time came for the Inca to rise, they would inherit a land rich with the knowledge of those who had come before them. The key to understanding the Incas' eventual greatness lies in these early foundations. Their empire, though grand in scale, was not built in a single generation. It was the product of thousands of years of human ingenuity, trial and error, and a profound connection to the land. The Andean peoples had spent millennia learning how to live in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. By the time the Inca Empire rose to power in the 15th century, they were standing on the shoulders of those who had come before them, each layer of knowledge adding to the grandeur of what would become the largest empire in the Americas. From the first hunter-gatherers to the agricultural revolution and the rise of early civilizations, the story of the Andes is one of gradual, organic growth. It is a testament to the power of human adaptation and the lasting influence of innovation passed down through the ages. The Andes were not just a backdrop for the Inca, they were the stage upon which the Inca's brilliance would unfold, a land shaped by the ingenuity of those who had learned to thrive in its high, harsh landscapes. And in this process of learning, adapting, and evolving, the Inca came to understand the land as no one had before. They did not conquer the Andes, they became one with them. In the history of the Andes, the rise of early civilizations was not marked by a sudden explosion of wealth or power, but by the steady, patient evolution of human ingenuity and adaptation. Long before the rise of the Inca, there were civilizations that laid the groundwork for the empire to come. The Caral, emerging around 2600 BC, and the Chavin, flourishing in the first millennium BC, were not simply early settlements. They were the architects of Andean civilization, their innovations and religious practices reverberating through centuries and directly influencing the great Inca Empire that would eventually unify the region. To understand the Caral civilization, one must first imagine the land they inhabited, a stretch of arid desert along the northern coast of Peru, where the Pacific Ocean meets the Andean foothills. This landscape, harsh and unforgiving, required an extraordinary level of innovation to transform it into a thriving urban center. The Caral people, one of the earliest known Andean cultures, rose to this challenge by creating a highly organized society that was both spiritually and technologically advanced for its time. Around 2600 BC, the Caral constructed monumental earthworks and urban centers, notable for their sunken circular plazas and ceremonial complexes. These plazas were not merely spaces for daily living, they were places of convergence where people came together for religious rituals, social gatherings, and governance. The architecture of Caral was built with the environment in mind, creating spaces that harmonized with the natural world. Though the Caral did not use ceramic technology, they crafted textiles from cotton and other natural fibers, a craft that would become central to Andean life. These textiles were not only practical, but also played an important role in the religious and cultural fabric of Caral society, symbolizing both community and connection to the land. Their agricultural innovations were equally impressive. The Caral mastered the art of irrigation, harnessing the waters of the nearby rivers to transform their arid environment into fertile farmland. By diverting water from the rivers and creating complex canal systems, they were able to cultivate crops like maize, cotton, and beans, which would sustain their population and fuel the growth of their cities. This early mastery of irrigation was a foundational skill that would be passed down through subsequent civilizations, including the Chavin, and would later reach its pinnacle under the Inca. Despite their early achievements, the Caral civilization was not destined to last forever. The environmental pressures and resource limitations of their coastal desert home eventually led to their decline. However, the innovations and architectural styles they developed would leave a lasting impact on future Andean societies. The Caral's urban planning and agricultural techniques would influence the later development of cities like the Manco and the Inca, who would look back to the Caral as early pioneers of complex urban life in the Andes. While the Caral people were shaping the coastal deserts, the highlands of Peru were undergoing a cultural transformation of their own. By the first millennium BC, the Chavin culture had emerged as the dominant religious and cultural force in the central Andes. The Chavin, centered around the religious and ceremonial hub of Chavin de Huanta, located in the Rio Mosna Valley, created a civilization that was not only a political and economic center, but also the spiritual heart of the Andes. At the core of Chavin de Huanta was its monumental architecture, an impressive temple complex designed not just for worship, but for creating a spiritual experience. The layout of the site was as much about acoustics as it was about architecture. Visitors to Chavin de Huanta would have encountered strange, otherworldly sounds that reverberated through the labyrinthine tunnels of the temple. These sounds, amplified by the design of the structure, would have invoked a sense of mystery and awe, drawing people into the spiritual experience. Chavin art, with its intricate carvings of animals and deities, was symbolic of the culture's deep connection to the natural world. They viewed the world through a spiritual lens, seeing animals like jaguars, snakes, and condors not only as powerful creatures, but as embodiments of divine forces. The Chavin people understood that power resided not just in human rulers, but in the forces of nature that surrounded them. This reverence for the natural world would be passed on to the future Inca, who would later adopt many of these symbols and integrate them into their own belief system. The Chavin culture also made strides in metallurgy, crafting intricate gold and silver jewelry that was both decorative and ceremonial. These precious metals, often used in religious rituals, would later become a hallmark of Andean civilization, particularly for the Inca, who would build vast reserves of gold and silver to adorn their temples and to assert their divine authority. But perhaps the most lasting influence of the Chavin culture was its ability to unify disparate groups across the Andes under a common religious and cultural banner. Through trade, art, and shared religious practices, the Chavin culture spread its influence across a vast swath of the region, from the coastal deserts to the highland valleys. This network of interconnected cultures would eventually provide the Inca with a well-established foundation upon which to build their empire. Both the Caral and Chavin cultures, though distinct in their geographic locations and societal structures, contributed foundational elements to the Inca Empire. The Caral's agricultural innovations, particularly their mastery of irrigation, set the stage for the sophisticated farming techniques the Inca would later employ. The Chavin, on the other hand, provided the Inca with a religious and cultural framework that would guide their belief system and imperial governance. The Chavin's artistic legacy, their reverence for the natural world, and their spiritual connections to the forces of nature would all be absorbed into the Inca worldview. As the Inca began to expand their territory in the 15th century, they were not starting from scratch. They inherited the cultural and technological advancements of the Caral, the Chavin, and other pre-Inca civilizations, building upon their knowledge to create a more centralized and expansive empire. The Inca did not simply conquer, they integrated. They absorbed the wisdom of the past, refining it and applying it on a scale never before seen in the Andes. The rise of the Inca Empire was not an isolated event, but the culmination of centuries of cultural development, religious influence, and technological innovation that had been passed down through the ages. In this way, the Caral and Chavin civilizations were not just precursors to the Inca, they were integral to the very fabric of Inca identity. The story of the Inca is, in many ways, a story of inheritance and innovation, a story that begins long before the first Sapa Inca took the throne and continues to echo through the Andean highlands today. In the Andean world, the seeds of civilization were sown long before the mighty Inca came to power. The vast and varied landscapes, stretching from the arid deserts to the snow-capped peaks, were home to many cultures, each leaving behind a legacy that would reverberate through time. Among the most influential were the Nazca and Moche civilizations, two powerful regional cultures that, in their own unique ways, shaped the trajectory of Andean civilization. Their achievements, ranging from monumental art to technological advancements, not only defined their own societies, but also paved the way for the Inca Empire, whose dominance would soon spread across the Andean world. The Nazca civilization flourished along the southern coast of Peru in a region of stark contrasts. On one side, the rugged peaks of the Andes cast their long shadows across the land. On the other, the vast, arid expanse of the coastal desert stretched out endlessly. Yet, despite the harshness of the environment, the Nazca built a civilization that would leave a permanent mark on the world. The Nazca are perhaps best known for their geoglyphs, immense designs etched into the desert floor, some over 200 feet long. From the ground, these designs would appear as little more than scratches in the earth. But when viewed from above, by the gods, or so the Nazca believed, the true scale and beauty of these ancient symbols became apparent. The geoglyphs depict a wide array of animals, plants, and geometric patterns, including figures such as the spider, the monkey, and the hummingbird. Though the exact purpose of these lines remains a mystery, scholars have long speculated that they were used for ceremonial purposes, perhaps as offerings to the gods or as part of an ancient ritual to summon water, essential for life in this arid region. It is clear that the Nazca, with their immense understanding of the land, saw the desert not as a barrier, but as a canvas. The lines themselves were drawn with great precision, demonstrating advanced knowledge of geometry and engineering. These feats were not just artistic, they were technological. The creation of such monumental figures required a careful manipulation of the earth, a testament to the Nazca's ability to shape their environment. These geoglyphs, still visible today, continue to awe and puzzle archaeologists. But more than that, they tell the story of a culture deeply connected to the land, aware of its rhythms, its patterns, and the spiritual forces that governed it. In addition to their artistic feats, the Nazca made remarkable advances in agriculture. The coastal desert, with its extreme lack of rainfall, might seem inhospitable, but the Nazca adapted, using their understanding of water, to create sophisticated irrigation systems. They constructed aqueducts, some of which are still functional today, that channeled water from the mountains down to their fields. These aqueducts allowed the Nazca to cultivate crops in what would otherwise have been an unyielding environment. The irrigation systems they developed laid the foundation for agricultural practices that would continue to influence Andean civilizations for centuries, including the Inca, who would build their empire upon similar principles of resource management. Despite their achievements, the Nazca civilization eventually declined, possibly due to changes in climate, such as prolonged droughts or the depletion of natural resources. But the legacy they left behind, in the form of their geoglyphs and agricultural innovations, would resonate long after their fall. The Inca, inheriting much of the Nazca's knowledge, would continue to use the irrigation systems and ceremonial practices that were pioneered by this early civilization. To the north of the Nazca, along the valleys and deserts of Peru's northern coast, the Moche civilization arose. Between 100 AD and 800 AD, the Moche built one of the most vibrant and influential cultures in the Andean world. Unlike the Nazca, whose artistic legacy is defined by the earth itself, the Moche were renowned for their monumental architecture, advanced metallurgy, and intricately detailed pottery. The Moche were masters of irrigation, constructing a vast network of canals that brought water to the arid desert regions they inhabited. This control of water allowed them to grow crops, such as maize, beans, and cotton, making agriculture the backbone of their economy. But their expertise didn't stop at farming. They also excelled in the arts and crafts, particularly pottery. Moche ceramics, with their vivid depictions of gods, animals, and daily life, are among the most sophisticated of ancient South American art. What sets Moche pottery apart is its remarkable realism. Portrait vessels, for example, depict faces with startling accuracy, and it is believed that these portraits may have been used in rituals to honor the deceased or serve as offerings to the gods. The Moche were also remarkable engineers. The Huaca del Sol, Temple of the Sun, and the Huaca de la Luna, Temple of the Moon, two massive adobe structures, stand as lasting monuments to their architectural skill. These temples were not merely ceremonial, they were political hubs, centers of power and governance, where the Moche elite wielded influence over both the spiritual and secular realms. The Moche believed their rulers were divine, and their massive structures served as a constant reminder of the ruler's connection to the gods. These temples were also places of human sacrifice, with evidence suggesting that rituals involving human offerings were common. This practice, though shocking to modern sensibilities, was part of a broader religious framework that viewed the balance between life and death as essential to maintaining the forces of nature. The Moche civilization, like the Nazca, eventually declined, possibly due to environmental changes or internal strife. But their cultural and technological achievements continued to resonate in the Andes. The Inca, in particular, would adopt many of the Moche's practices, particularly in the realms of agriculture and religious symbolism. The Moche's emphasis on divine kingship, their elaborate religious rituals, and their mastery of metallurgy and irrigation would all be incorporated into the Inca worldview, forming the foundation upon which the Inca Empire would be built. The Nazca and Moche civilizations, though they were geographically separated, shared a deep understanding of the Andean environment and its rhythms. From the Nazca, the Inca inherited agricultural techniques, including the intricate use of irrigation to manage water in the arid regions. The Moche, with their reverence for divine rulers and their monumental architecture, provided the Inca with a model for governance and ceremonial life. These early cultures were not isolated entities. Rather, they were interconnected through trade, religious practices, and shared knowledge. When the Inca rose to power in the 15th century, they absorbed and refined the innovations of the Nazca and Moche, adapting them to create one of the largest and most sophisticated empires in the Americas. In the highlands of the Andes, where towering snow-capped mountains meet the shimmering expanse of Lake Titicaca, the early civilizations of the region left behind a legacy that would echo through time. Long before the rise of the Inca, the Tiwanaku and Wari civilizations set the stage for the development of Andean culture, contributing innovations in agriculture, architecture, and governance that would lay the foundations for the empire that would rule the Andes. Their achievements, once obscure, continue to captivate and inspire, providing a testament to the resourcefulness, vision, and resilience of the people who inhabited this challenging but awe-inspiring landscape. The Tiwanaku civilization, centered around the majestic Lake Titicaca in modern-day Bolivia, was one of the earliest and most influential cultures in the southern Andes. The city of Tiwanaku, which flourished between 500 and 1000 AD, was not merely a collection of dwellings, but a carefully constructed urban center designed to harmonize with the natural world. For the Tiwanaku people, the landscape itself was sacred, and their architectural and agricultural feats were grounded in a deep spiritual connection to the earth, the sun, and the water. One of the most striking features of Tiwanaku was their raised field agriculture, an innovation that transformed the high-altitude environment into a sustainable source of food. The Tiwanaku people developed a sophisticated system of artificial planting platforms, or suka kolos, which were separated by channels of water. These channels not only provided irrigation, but created micro-environments where crops could thrive, despite the harsh, frosty conditions of the high Andes. The raised fields protected crops from frost, moderated soil temperature, and facilitated better drainage, allowing the Tiwanaku to cultivate a variety of crops, including potatoes, quinoa, and maize, in a region that would otherwise have been inhospitable to large-scale farming. This agricultural innovation was one of the key reasons for the survival and prosperity of Tiwanaku society, and it would later inspire the agricultural practices of the Inca. But Tiwanaku's contributions went far beyond agriculture. The city's architecture was equally impressive. The Tiwanaku people built vast stone structures, many of which were aligned with celestial bodies, showing a keen understanding of astronomy and geometry. One of the most iconic sites of Tiwanaku is Pumapunku, a complex of megalithic stones that seems almost otherworldly. The precision with which these stones were cut and fitted together, without the use of mortar, has puzzled archaeologists for centuries. Some blocks, weighing more than 100 tons, were transported across the region and assembled with such exactitude that not even a blade of grass could fit between the stones. These architectural achievements, characterized by their scale and precision, would influence the Inca in their construction of monumental structures like Machu Picchu and the walls of Cusco. Tiwanaku also had a profound spiritual and cultural impact on the surrounding region. The city was a center of religious activity, where people from all corners of the Andes came to worship and seek guidance from the gods. Tiwanaku's temples, such as the Temple of the Sun, were not just architectural feats, but symbolic representations of the divine. Their religious practices, which included elaborate ceremonies and offerings to the gods, emphasized the interconnectedness of the natural and spiritual worlds. These practices would influence the religious worldview of the Inca, who saw their rulers as divinely ordained and their empire as a manifestation of the god's will. By 1000 AD, the Tiwanaku civilization began to decline, likely due to a combination of environmental factors, such as prolonged droughts and internal pressures. However, their cultural and technological innovations did not disappear with their fall. Instead, they were absorbed and adapted by subsequent cultures in the region, including the Wari, who would carry forward the Tiwanaku legacy into the coming centuries. While the Tiwanaku civilization was flourishing in the southern Andes, to the north, the Wari civilization was beginning to rise. The Wari, who thrived between 600 and 1100 AD, were one of the first Andean cultures to build a true empire, extending their influence across much of the central Andes. Unlike the Tiwanaku, whose reach was primarily regional, the Wari actively sought to expand their territory through military conquest and strategic alliances. At the heart of Wari expansion was their road system, a vast network of highways that connected their capital, Wari, near modern-day Ayacucho, to the farthest reaches of their empire. These roads, paved with stone and designed for both military and administrative purposes, allowed the Wari to move troops, goods, and information quickly across vast distances. The Wari were not just conquerors, they were administrators, organizing and integrating diverse regions into a coherent empire. This model of centralized control would later be refined by the Inca, whose own road system would stretch over 25,000 miles across the Andes. In addition to their road networks, the Wari were military innovators. Their fortified cities, like Vilcabamba, were strategically placed to control important trade routes and protect the empire from external threats. The Wari constructed military outposts along their roadways, ensuring their ability to project power and maintain order across their vast empire. Unlike the Inca, who would later create a more cohesive military structure, the Wari's military strategy was marked by a blend of conquest and integration. The Wari sought to incorporate conquered peoples into their empire through trade, cultural exchange, and religious influence, rather than simply subjugating them. The Wari were also remarkable in their artistic achievements. Their intricate textiles, ceramics, and metalwork demonstrated a high degree of craftsmanship. The Wari are particularly known for their textiles, which featured vibrant colors and complex patterns. These textiles were not only beautiful, but also served as expressions of social status and political power. Wari ceramics, often depicting stylized human faces and animals, were used in religious rituals and as offerings to the gods. These artifacts are a testament to the Wari's cultural sophistication and their ability to combine art, religion, and politics into a cohesive cultural identity. The Wari also contributed to agricultural innovation. They built extensive systems of terracing, which allowed them to cultivate crops in the steep, mountainous terrain of the Andes. These terraces, which were often irrigated by sophisticated canal systems, were the predecessors to the Inca's own agricultural terraces, which would eventually feed an empire of millions. The Wari also practiced crop rotation and diversification, ensuring that their agricultural systems remained sustainable over the long term. By 1100 AD, the Wari civilization began to decline, likely due to internal unrest and environmental factors, including severe droughts. However, their cultural and technological innovations had already laid the foundation for the next great empire in the Andes, the Inca. The Tiwanaku and Wari civilizations may have fallen long before the rise of the Inca, but their influence on the Andean world was profound. From the Tiwanaku, the Inca inherited agricultural techniques that allowed them to feed their vast empire. The raised field systems and irrigation methods developed by the Tiwanaku were refined by the Inca and became central to their agricultural success. From the Wari, the Inca inherited the idea of empire building through territorial expansion, military innovation, and administrative control. The Wari's road systems and methods of governance provided a model for the Inca, who would later create an empire that spanned the length of the Andes. The Inca also adopted the Wari's military strategies, their fortifications, and their ability to integrate diverse peoples into a single, cohesive empire. The Tiwanaku and Wari civilizations were not just precursors to the Inca, they were integral to the development of the Andean world. Their innovations in agriculture, architecture, and governance laid the foundation for the Inca Empire, allowing it to rise to unprecedented heights. The legacy of these early civilizations continues to echo through the Andean highlands, reminding us of the ingenuity and resilience of the people who shaped this remarkable region. At the dawn of the 13th century, the Valley of Cusco was not yet the seat of an empire. It was a small and relatively insignificant region, tucked away in the high Andean mountains, where multiple ethnic groups jostled for control of the fertile land. Among these groups, the Inca were just one of many, no more significant than the hundreds of others that dotted the Andean region. Their destiny, however, would not be shaped solely by military power or political maneuvering. It was the gods themselves who had a role to play in the Inca's rise, and it was through divine intervention that the Inca would transform from an obscure tribe into the dominant force in the Andes. In Inca mythology, the origin of their rule is not just the story of human ambition, but of divine mandate. Manco Capac, the legendary first emperor of the Inca, and his sister wife Mama Oclao, were said to be born from the very will of the sun god, Inti. According to the legends, Inti sent Manco Capac and Mama Oclao from the sacred island of Titicaca, instructing them to find fertile land where they could establish a city that would grow into a mighty empire. The two siblings, gods in human form, arrived at the shores of the Cusco Valley, where, according to the myth, Manco Capac's golden staff sank into the earth at the site where the city of Cusco would be founded. The Inca believed this was a divine sign, a moment when the heavens touched the earth, marking the creation of their sacred capital. The valley was small, and their tribe was one of many in a region already populated by various ethnic groups, each with its own chief and customs. Yet, the Incas' rise was driven not just by their military capabilities, but by the belief that they were chosen by the gods themselves to rule. In the Andean world, the divine was never far from the earthly realm. For the Inca, their rulers were gods among men, intimately connected to the heavens and nature. The legend of Manco Capac and Mama Ocolo provided the foundation for this divine kingship, where the Sapa Inca, the emperor, was not merely a political leader, but the living incarnation of the sun god, Inti. While the legends of Manco Capac and Mama Ocolo captured the imagination of the people, the practical realities of ruling a small tribe in the Cusco Valley required more than divine will. Manco Capac faced the challenge of uniting the disparate tribes of the valley, each with its own customs, traditions, and loyalties. Through a combination of diplomacy and military strength, he began to consolidate power. The early days of the Inca were marked by alliances and marriage as strategic tools of statecraft. Manco Capac's leadership was not simply about conquering territory, but about forging connections with neighboring tribes. Through these alliances, the Inca were able to build a support base that would enable them to expand their influence across the Cusco Valley. Over time, Manco Capac's tribe, once small and inconspicuous group, began to gain a reputation as a people destined for greatness. But it was not just his political acumen that set Manco Capac apart. It was the spiritual legitimacy he wielded. The people of Cusco believed in the divine mandate that Manco Capac carried. His leadership was reinforced by a deeply ingrained belief that he was the earthly representative of Inti, and thus his word was law. This divine connection allowed him to exert control over the valley, creating a stable and centralized system of governance. While Manco Capac's reign laid the foundation for the Inca, it was his grandson, Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, who would take the Inca from a small tribe to the precipice of empire. Born in the early 15th century, Pachacuti's rise to power is a tale of vision, military brilliance, and divine favor. His defining moment came during the conflict with the Chanca, a powerful and aggressive tribe that threatened to destroy Cusco. The Inca army, vastly outnumbered, seemed doomed to fail. Yet Pachacuti, a young and unproven leader at the time, led his forces to a decisive victory, saving the city and solidifying his place as the ruler of Cusco. This victory, like many in Inca history, was seen as a divine intervention, a sign that Pachacuti was the chosen leader of the sun god, Inti. This was not just a military triumph, but a moment of divine validation. It was as if the heavens themselves had smiled upon Pachacuti, cementing his legitimacy as the Sapa Inca. From this moment on, Pachacuti embarked on a path that would lead to the expansion of the Inca's territory, beginning with the conquest of neighboring tribes and culminating in the formation of the Inca Empire. Pachacuti's reign was marked by strategic alliances, military conquest, and a profound understanding of governance. He transformed the Inca from a small, isolated tribe into an expansive kingdom, using a combination of force and diplomacy. Under his leadership, the Inca began their expansionist campaigns, first securing control of the Cusco Valley, and then moving outward to conquer territories across the Andean region. Pachacuti's greatest achievement was his ability to organize and administrate a rapidly growing empire. He established a system of roadways and administrative divisions that allowed him to govern his expanding empire with efficiency. the Inca built a vast network of roads that spanned from the northern reaches of modern-day Ecuador to the southern deserts of Chile. These roads, paved with stone, were not just physical pathways. They were symbolic links that united the diverse regions of the Inca Empire under a single banner. Pachacuti also reorganized the Inca social and economic system. He instituted a labor tax known as the mita, which required each community to contribute to public works, such as agriculture, road construction, and military service. This system allowed the Inca to construct massive infrastructure projects from terraced agricultural fields to fortresses and temples, all while maintaining control over their subjects. Perhaps most importantly, Pachacuti solidified the concept of divine kingship, reinforcing the belief that the Sapa Inca was not just a political leader, but a living god. The Sapa Inca was the son of Inti, and as such, his authority was unquestioned. This belief in divine rule would become a central tenet of the Inca Empire and would inspire loyalty and reverence from millions of subjects. By the time Pachacuti's successors, Topa Inca Yupanqui and Huayna Capac, ascended to the throne, the Inca Empire had already become a powerful force in the Andes. The empire expanded rapidly, absorbing the Chimu, the Nazca, and other civilizations, each contributing to the cultural and technological richness of the Inca state. But the early rise of the Inca was not just the product of military conquest. It was the result of a unique combination of myth, divine legitimacy, and political vision. From the mythic beginnings of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo to the military brilliance of Pachacuti, the rise of the Inca was a story of divine will and human ambition. Their empire, built on the foundations of divine kingship, strategic conquest, and agricultural innovation, would eventually become one of the greatest empires the world had ever seen. And though the Inca Empire would fall in the 16th century to Spanish conquistadors, their rise from humble beginnings to empire building was a testament to the power of myth, leadership, and vision, an empire that would forever leave its mark on the Andes. In 1438 AD, the people of the Inca kingdom in the Cusco Valley faced a crossroads. Once a small tribe among many others vying for dominance in the harsh Andean highlands, the Inca stood on the precipice of something far greater than anyone could have imagined. At this critical juncture, a man named Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui ascended to the throne, unknowingly becoming the architect of the greatest empire the Andes had ever known. Pachacuti, the ninth ruler of the Inca, was a figure marked by both legend and destiny. His rise to power was not merely the result of a random series of events, but rather the unfolding of a vision that had been set into motion by the divine will of the gods. His path to the throne, though seemingly paved with fortune, was anything but easy. The young Pachacuti faced a kingdom at a critical tipping point, a kingdom that was surrounded by rivals, threatened by war, and vulnerable to invasion. But in the midst of these challenges, Pachacuti would transform the fate of the Inca forever, not through sheer force alone, but with an understanding of leadership that combined divine mandate, military brilliance, and an unmatched strategic vision. The first true test of Pachacuti's leadership came in the form of the Chanca, a fierce rival tribe that sought to annihilate the Inca. The Chanca were formidable warriors, much larger in number and more experienced in battle. They marched on Cusco, the heart of the Inca kingdom, intent on destroying the city and eradicating the Inca once and for all. The very survival of the Inca kingdom hung in the balance. It was during this time of crisis that Pachacuti, still a relatively young and unproven leader, rose to prominence. The Inca defenders, caught off guard and demoralized, seemed on the verge of defeat. Yet, Pachacuti, driven by his unshakable confidence and his belief in the divine favor bestowed upon him, rallied his troops. He didn't just lead from the front, but from within, inspiring his warriors and instilling in them the belief that they were destined for greatness. With this newfound spirit, the Inca forces, under Pachacuti's command, fought back with a ferocity and coordination that caught the Chanca off guard. In a stunning turn of events, Pachacuti led his forces to victory. The Chanca, overwhelmed by the unity and determination of the Inca, were forced to retreat. For the people of Cusco, it was a moment of divine validation. Pachacuti's victory was seen as a direct sign from the sun god Inti, cementing his role as the legitimate ruler of the Inca. The victory not only secured the Inca's hold over Cusco, but also granted Pachacuti the moral authority to shape the future of his kingdom. This victory over the Chanca marked the beginning of Pachacuti's transformation from a ruler of a small, struggling kingdom to the architect of an empire that would stretch across the Andean mountains. His reign would no longer be defined by fear of conquest, but by the strategy of expansion. After the Chanca defeat, Pachacuti didn't simply consolidate power within the Cusco Valley. He looked outward, toward the neighboring regions that had once been potential threats. Unlike other rulers, who may have focused on holding on to their existing territories, Pachacuti's vision was clear. The Inca must expand, unite, and dominate. His military campaigns were not just about conquering lands, but about creating a unified Andean empire that transcended borders and tribes. Pachacuti's military strategy was multifaceted. He expanded through diplomacy, forging alliances with neighboring tribes and integrating them into the growing Inca Empire. He knew that the strength of his empire did not rely solely on military conquest, but on the ability to create lasting alliances. However, when diplomacy failed, Pachacuti was no stranger to decisive and effective military action. His forces, though initially smaller than those of his enemies, employed superior tactics, strategic positioning, and a relentless will to win. The Inca road system, which was built during Pachacuti's reign, played a vital role in these conquests. By constructing an elaborate network of roads that stretched across the empire, Pachacuti made it easier to move armies and supplies quickly, enabling the Inca to respond to threats with unmatched speed. This infrastructure, as much a symbol of Inca unity as a strategic tool, would be one of the defining features of the Inca Empire for centuries. With expansion came the need for organization and governance, and Pachacuti's administrative genius was evident in the way he structured the growing empire. The Inca government was not just a loose confederation of territories. It was a highly organized, centralized system that allowed Pachacuti to maintain control over vast distances. He divided the empire into 4 regions, or suyus, each governed by a trusted official. These regions were connected by the extensive road system, ensuring that communication and resources flowed seamlessly from one part of the empire to the other. Perhaps one of Pachacuti's greatest innovations was the mita system, a labor tax that required each community to contribute a portion of its labor to state projects. This system allowed the Inca to build and maintain infrastructure, such as roads, agricultural terraces, and military fortifications, without relying on a traditional monetary economy. It was a system that united the empire under a common cause, with every citizen contributing to the empire's growth. Pachacuti also strengthened the religious structure of the Inca, making Inti, the sun god, the central figure in Inca worship. This religious focus tied the people directly to their emperor, who was considered the living representative of Inti. The concept of divine kingship helped solidify the emperor's absolute authority and ensured loyalty from the people. When Pachacuti passed on his rule to his son Topa, Inca Yupanqui, the Inca Empire was no longer a small kingdom. It was a powerful, unified force in the Andes. Under his successors, the Inca would continue to expand, reaching new heights in military power, agricultural innovation, and cultural development. Yet, it was Pachacuti's military victories, administrative genius, and religious consolidation that laid the foundation for the empire's imperial nature. Pachacuti's reign set the stage for the Inca Empire's golden age, where territory, culture, and religion would be woven together under the unifying authority of the Sapa Inca. His vision, driven by both divine favor and political insight, turned the Inca into a people who believed not only in their divine right to rule, but in the imperial destiny that had been ordained by the sun god, Inti. In Pachacuti's legacy, the Inca Empire found its identity. From humble beginnings in the Cusco Valley to becoming the dominant power in the Andes, the empire was built on a foundation of military brilliance, political strategy, and divine legitimacy. A foundation that would shape the course of Andean history for centuries to come. The Inca Empire, which spanned the rugged Andean mountains, was a civilization where the divine, the political, and the natural world converged in ways that were both extraordinary and deeply rooted in everyday life. Stretching from present-day Ecuador to Chile, the empire thrived not just because of its military might or territorial expansion, but because of its remarkable ability to adapt, innovate, and weave together a unified society across diverse peoples, landscapes, and beliefs. At the heart of the Inca success was their ability to connect their culture with the land, their religion, and their people. Every achievement, from agriculture to architecture, was a reflection of this interconnectedness. Religion, social structure, governance, and technological innovations did not stand in isolation. They were parts of a larger, cohesive system that not only sustained the Inca Empire, but also allowed it to grow and endure for centuries. The Inca social structure was organized with precision and purpose, designed to foster both collective responsibility and loyalty to the Sapa Inca, the emperor. At the top of this hierarchical system stood the Sapa Inca, believed to be the descendant of Inti, the sun god. This divine status gave the Sapa Inca an almost unquestionable authority, both spiritually and politically. His word was law, and his connection to the divine justified his rule over millions. Below him were the noble families, the priesthood, the military leaders, and skilled artisans who were deeply integrated into the fabric of Inca life. But it wasn't just the elites who played a role in the success of the empire. The Ailu system, which organized people into kinship-based groups, allowed for the cultivation of a cooperative society where each member had a clear role in supporting the larger community. It was this communal responsibility that helped the Inca achieve remarkable feats of organization and resource distribution. At the heart of Inca governance was the concept of reciprocity, the idea that each person's contribution to the empire, whether through labor, tribute, or service, was returned by the state in the form of protection, food, and shelter. The mita system, a labor tax, required that every person, from the farmer to the artisan, contribute to state projects such as agriculture, military service, and infrastructure. This system helped create unity and interdependence, strengthening the bond between the people and their divine ruler. Inca religious beliefs were woven into every aspect of life, from the governance of the empire to the smallest acts of daily life. At the heart of Inca spirituality was the worship of Inti, the sun god, whose warmth and light were seen as the source of all life. Inti was more than just a god. He was the foundational deity of the Inca people, and the Sapa Inca was considered his earthly representative. This divine connection provided the emperor with the legitimacy to rule over the diverse peoples of the empire, reinforcing his role as the living god. The religious life of the Inca was deeply entwined with their connection to the land. Pachamama, the earth goddess, was venerated as the nurturing force that provided fertility to the land, ensuring the survival of crops and animals. The Inca saw no division between the spiritual and physical realms. They believed that maintaining harmony with the gods, especially Inti, was essential for the empire's prosperity. Sacred rituals were performed regularly to honor these deities, with the most important ceremonies taking place in the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. This grand temple, with walls once covered in sheets of gold, was the spiritual heart of the empire, symbolizing the divine connection between the people, their emperor, and their gods. Inca art was not merely decorative, it was a visual representation of their culture, beliefs, and power. The textiles produced by the Inca were some of the finest in the ancient world. Alpaca wool and cotton were woven into vibrant patterns that expressed religious significance, social status, and territorial identity. These textiles were worn by nobility, priests, and warriors, and they played a central role in religious ceremonies and state affairs. Inca pottery, often used for daily activities, also held deep symbolic meaning. The ceramic vessels, some shaped like animals, others like human faces, served both practical and ceremonial purposes, reminding the people of their connection to the divine and to nature. The Inca also excelled in metalwork, creating finely crafted jewelry, tools, and ceremonial objects from gold, silver, and copper, often as offerings to their gods. The Inca were masters of adaptation, using the land to their advantage through innovative agricultural practices. Their understanding of the environment was profound, and they developed techniques to turn even the most challenging landscapes into productive ones. One of their most remarkable agricultural innovations was the vertical archipelago model. This system allowed the Inca to cultivate crops in different ecological zones, from the high-altitude Andean plateaus to the fertile lowland valleys, creating a network of agricultural areas that provided a diverse range of crops suited to each region's climate. The terracing systems the Inca created were another testament to their engineering prowess. By carving step terraces into the steep mountainsides, the Inca transformed unusable land into productive fields, maximizing the amount of arable land in the empire. These terraces were not only beautifully functional, but they also incorporated advanced irrigation techniques, allowing crops to grow in even the harshest conditions. This attention to detail in managing water resources ensured that the empire could sustain its growing population. Inca architecture, too, is legendary for its durability and precision. The stonework seen in Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman is still revered today for its intricate construction, where massive stones were fit together without mortar, creating structures that have withstood centuries of seismic activity. These architectural marvels were not just for defense, they were symbolic of the Inca's mastery over nature. The sun temples, fortresses, and palaces built during this time were designed to honor the gods and reflect the divine order that the Sapa Inca embodied. The Inca Empire was vast, and maintaining control over such a sprawling territory required a sophisticated system of governance. The Sapa Inca ruled with absolute authority, but he was supported by an intricate system of administrators, military leaders, and local rulers. Each of the empire's 4 regions, or suyus, was governed by a regional official who ensured that the emperor's laws and policies were carried out effectively. The Inca used the quipu, a system of knotted strings, to record census data, manage resources, and communicate across the empire. At its core, The Inca Empire was built on the unity of its people, who were bound together by a shared belief in their divine ruler, their connection to the land, and their collective responsibility to maintain the empire's success. Agricultural ingenuity, architectural mastery, religious devotion, and a cohesive social structure were the pillars that allowed the Inca to thrive. They weren't just rulers of land, they were stewards of a people and a culture that believed in their rightful place in the natural and divine order. From their sacred, gold-covered temples to the agricultural terraces that climbed the mountainsides, the Inca left behind a legacy of ingenuity, devotion, and unity. This empire, born from the high mountain valleys of Cusco, would grow to become the largest and most powerful state in pre-Columbian America, a testament to the Incas' ability to harmonize their culture, beliefs, and technological innovations into a civilization that endured for centuries. The mighty Inca Empire, once a unified and thriving civilization, spanning from the equator in the north to the deserts of Chile in the south, fell in the early 16th century. The story of its downfall is one of tragic irony, how an empire built on military and spiritual cohesion, bound together by divine kingship and ingenuity, was shattered by a combination of internal strife, foreign invaders, and a deadly invisible enemy. What followed was a rapid and almost unimaginable collapse, marking the end of an era. While the arrival of the Spanish in 1532 is often cited as the most significant cause of the Inca collapse, the true unraveling of the empire began long before their ships ever reached the Andean coast. Internal divisions, long brewing under the surface, would prove to be the key vulnerability that ultimately made the Inca susceptible to conquest. This internal decay created a fractured empire, ripe for exploitation, at the exact moment when the Spanish arrived in the Andes. The time of the Spanish arrival, the Inca Empire was far from the unified force it had once been. The civil war between Atahualpa and his half-brother Huascar had torn apart the political and social fabric of the empire. This war, which spanned several years, was not only a struggle for power, but a deep cultural and personal conflict between two brothers, both of whom claimed divine legitimacy as rulers. Atahualpa, who had emerged victorious in the north, was the de facto ruler, but the war left deep divisions within the empire, an empire that was now fractured, both politically and spiritually. For the Inca, the emperor was not merely a political figure, but a living god, the son of the sun god Inti, and the central figure holding the empire together. The civil war, marked by betrayal, executions, and atrocities, severely undermined the faith of the people in their leadership. The loyalty of many subject peoples wavered, and cracks began to show in the empire's once unbreakable unity. With Atahualpa's victory came a weakened empire, a territory where regional leaders were disillusioned and more open to foreign influence. The war between Atahualpa and Huascar, although eventually resolved with Atahualpa's victory, left the empire in a state of disarray. The weakened central authority would prove to be a fatal flaw when the Spanish came, ready to exploit the Incas' vulnerability. The year 1532 marked the beginning of the end for the Inca Empire. Francisco Pizarro, a Spanish conquistador with just 168 men, arrived on the northern coast of Peru. Armed with guns, steel, and horses, the Spanish were a force entirely unknown to the Inca, whose warriors fought with wooden clubs, stone-tipped spears, and slings. Pizarro, like many of his fellow conquistadors, was driven by a lust for gold, glory, and the Christian mission to convert new peoples. He had heard tales of the wealth of the Inca and had come to claim it for Spain. What the Spanish did not know was that the Inca Empire, though vast, was already on the verge of collapse. The civil war had weakened their political structure, and the leadership of Atahualpa, though powerful, was divisive. It was a kingdom in turmoil, and its gods themselves were no longer fully trusted to deliver salvation. The meeting between Pizarro and Atahualpa in Cajamarca would become one of the most significant and fateful moments in history. Pizarro had carefully planned the encounter, knowing that he could never hope to match the Inca in strength, but his true strength lay in his cunning. The meeting between the two leaders, one a powerful emperor who ruled millions, the other a foreign invader with only 168 men, was set to become a dramatic clash of civilizations. When Atahualpa arrived in Cajamarca in November 1532, he was greeted by Pizarro's men, but he had no way of knowing the treachery that lay in wait. The Spanish, having made some initial gestures of diplomacy, soon revealed their true intentions. In a surprise ambush, Pizarro's soldiers attacked Atahualpa's unarmed guards, using their firearms and horses to strike fear into the hearts of the Inca. Within moments, Atahualpa was captured, and with him, the divine connection to the Inca people was shattered. The shock of Atahualpa's capture reverberated throughout the empire. To the Inca, their emperor was not just a ruler, but a god. His capture by such a small, foreign force symbolized the vulnerability of the entire empire. The once mighty Inca, so confident in their divine right to rule, were now at the mercy of a few hundred men with swords and guns. Pizarro offered Atahualpa a deal. If he filled a room with gold and silver, he would be freed. Atahualpa, desperate and willing to do anything to save his life, agreed. Gold and silver were gathered from across the empire, flooding the Spanish with unimaginable wealth. But when the room was filled, Atahualpa was not freed. Instead, he was executed by the Spanish, his life taken in July 1533, despite his promise of ransom. Atahualpa's execution was not just the death of a man, it was the death of the spiritual and political center of the Inca. With his death, the Inca lost their guiding light, the man they believed to be the living son of the sun god. The shock of the event shattered the Incas' belief in their divine ruler and left the empire vulnerable to collapse. While the Spanish soldiers may have been the visible force behind the fall of the Inca, an invisible enemy had already begun to take its toll. Smallpox, brought by the Europeans, had already begun to ravage the Inca population before Pizarro even set foot on the continent. The disease spread with terrifying speed, cutting down entire populations, including some of the Inca nobility. Entire regions of the empire were devastated, with reports of entire villages being wiped out. The death toll from disease was staggering, and it left the Inca people vulnerable, both socially and militarily. As the Inca nobility succumbed to the disease, so too did their ability to manage the empire's vast and complex systems. The loss of life among the elite, who were often responsible for governance, military organization, and religious rituals, further fractured the empire's already weakened structure. By 1533, the heart of the Inca Empire, Cusco, had fallen to the Spanish. Once a sacred city, home to the Temple of the Sun, it was now in the hands of foreign invaders. Pizarro and his men, having captured the emperor and plundered the Inca treasury, moved swiftly toward the city. The Inca, now leaderless and disorganized, made attempts to resist, but they were too weakened by internal strife, the loss of Atahualpa, and the effects of disease. With Cusco's fall, the Inca Empire was effectively defeated. Despite efforts from later Inca rulers to rally resistance, the Inca were never able to reclaim their former strength. Within a few short years, the mighty empire that had once ruled the Andes was replaced by Spanish colonial rule. The collapse of the Inca Empire was not merely the loss of a kingdom, it was the destruction of a civilization. What had once been a society bound by religious devotion agricultural brilliance, and military innovation, was reduced to ruins. The arrival of the Spanish, their capture of Atahualpa, and the spread of disease were the final blows in a story of a mighty empire brought to its knees. The fall of the Inca was a tragic story of ambition, betrayal, and cultural devastation. It was the death of a society, its gods, and its identity. The consequences of the Spanish invasion were profound, leaving an indelible mark on the Andes and altering the course of history in South America forever. In the shadow of defeat and death, the Inca people's spirit remained unbroken, even after their once glorious empire was shattered by the arrival of the Spanish. A flicker of resistance still burned brightly in the highlands of the Andes. The creation of the Neo-Inca state in the remote wilderness of Vilcabamba marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter of defiance, determination, and hope. The Neo-Inca state was more than just a refuge for the Inca. It was the last stand of a civilization that refused to surrender, a reminder to the Spanish that the Inca were not easily subdued. In 1536, Manco Inca, the last legitimate Sapa Inca, escaped from the clutches of Spanish captivity, setting in motion the most significant act of defiance the Spanish would face. After being used as a puppet ruler by the Spanish, Manco could no longer abide by their demands. His heart burned with the desire for revenge, and his mind began to craft a plan for the Inca to rise again, escaping from Cajamarca, the very place where his father Atahualpa had been executed. Manco fled to the dense forests of the Vilcabamba Valley. This valley, hidden in the towering mountains of Peru's Andes, offered a refuge for Manco and his loyal followers. Here, he would reclaim his power, forming the Neo-Inca state, a sanctuary for the remnants of the Inca nobility and a symbol of the enduring Inca identity. With his newly formed army, Manco set his sights on the Spanish stronghold of Cusco, the city once home to the heart of the Inca Empire. The year 1536 saw the beginning of what would become one of the most dramatic episodes of resistance in the Spanish conquest. Cusco, the spiritual and political center of the Inca world, was a fortress in its own right. Yet, it was vulnerable. Manco's forces, though far smaller than the Spanish, had the advantage of familiarity with the terrain, and they struck swiftly. The siege of Cusco was a remarkable moment, as the Inca forces, using guerrilla tactics, surrounded the Spanish-held city. For several months, the Spanish were trapped, unable to break out, and the Inca resistance seemed poised to take back their former capital. The Spanish, caught off guard by the strength of Manco's leadership and the unity of the Inca forces, were forced to call for reinforcements. But the Spanish were not easily defeated. They brought in fresh soldiers and siege weapons, and in the face of reinforcements, Manco's forces were overwhelmed. The siege ended in failure, but the Inca were far from defeated. The resistance continued in the mountains, far from the Spanish forces. After the failure of the siege, Manco retreated to Vilcabamba, where he reorganized and regrouped his forces. This remote refuge would become the Neo-Inca state, the final bastion of Inca sovereignty. The Inca continued to resist, operating from their mountain stronghold, launching occasional raids against Spanish settlements, and maintaining a sense of hope among the Inca people. Though the Neo-Inca state was isolated, it stood as a symbol of the Inca's resilience and determination to preserve their way of life. Manco's role as a leader was both symbolic and real. He remained the figurehead of resistance, the embodiment of the Inca gods, and his refusal to accept Spanish rule inspired his people. Yet, Manco's eventual submission to the Spanish in 1542 marked a moment of painful compromise. Faced with insurmountable odds and seeing the destruction of his people, Manco agreed to a peace treaty, accepting Spanish authority in exchange for autonomy in Vilcabamba. It was a reluctant submission, but it allowed the Neo-Inca state to survive, at least for a time. Manco's son, Sayri Tupac, succeeded him as the leader of the Neo-Inca state, inheriting both the throne and the burden of resistance. Sayri Tupac ruled from 1550 to 1560, navigating the difficult terrain of diplomacy and resistance. His reign was marked by constant tension. He sought peace with the Spanish, but was also caught in the struggle for cultural preservation and Inca autonomy. His attempts to preserve Inca culture while dealing with the Spanish demands created a fragile balance, which ultimately led to his decision to submit to the Spanish crown in 1560. This submission marked the end of active resistance for a time, and the Neo-Inca state lost much of its political power. Sayri Tupac's submission was not the end of the Inca spirit, however. It was a tragic moment, one that symbolized the struggle between preserving tradition and facing the overwhelming force of foreign conquest. Despite his capitulation, Sayri Tupac's decision allowed for the survival of Inca culture, which would continue to flourish in subtle ways, even under Spanish rule. Tupac Amaru, Sayri Tupac's half-brother, became the last ruler of the Neo-Inca state. A leader forged in the fires of resistance, Tupac Amaru refused to accept the Spanish domination of his people in the late 1560s and early 1570s. Tupac Amaru led a series of uprisings against the Spanish. His forces, though smaller and less equipped than the Spanish, fought desperately to maintain their independence. His resistance was not only military, it was also a symbolic defiance against the foreign invaders who had brought so much devastation to his people. Despite his efforts, Tupac Amaru's resistance came to a tragic end in 1572. After a betrayal by one of his allies, Tupac Amaru was captured by the Spanish. Brought to Cusco, he was subjected to a humiliating and brutal execution. The execution of Tupac Amaru was not just the death of a man, but the final blow to the Neo-Inca state. The Inca lost their last leader, and the spirit of resistance was silenced, though not forgotten. Tupac Amaru's martyrdom marked the end of the Neo-Inca state, but it also served as a symbol for generations to come. His death would become a rallying cry for those who continued to resist Spanish rule, and his story would inspire future generations to fight for the preservation of their culture and identity. The fall of the Neo-Inca state in 1572 did not mark the end of the Inca spirit. The resistance led by Manco Inca, Sayri Tupac, and Tupac Amaru remained a powerful symbol of indigenous defiance against colonialism. Though the Inca Empire itself had fallen, their legacy of resilience lived on, echoing through history as a testament to the strength and unity of a people who, despite overwhelming odds, continued to fight for their independence. In the remote hills of Vilcabamba, the last of the Inca ruled with the same tenacity and hope that had defined their empire. The Neo-Inca state may have fallen, but its story became an enduring symbol of cultural survival and resistance against foreign domination, proving that the legacy of the Inca could not be extinguished even in the face of colonial conquest. The fall of the Inca Empire in the 16th century marked the end of one of the greatest civilizations the world had ever seen. The Spanish conquest shattered the political, social, and spiritual unity that had once defined the Inca, and yet, even as the empire crumbled under the weight of foreign invaders and disease, its legacy continued to echo through the centuries. The Inca may have lost their empire, but their contributions to agriculture, architecture, and society still shape the Andean region and resonate with millions today. One of the most profound contributions the Inca made to human civilization was their agricultural innovations. The Inca were unparalleled in their ability to adapt to the challenging Andean geography, turning steep mountain slopes and arid highlands into fertile farmland. Their terracing systems, the art of creating stepped fields carved into mountainsides, allowed them to maximize agricultural production in areas where flat land was scarce. These terraces, supported by advanced irrigation systems, ensured that crops could thrive in the high-altitude climate, where temperature fluctuations and water scarcity pose constant challenges. Today, many Andean farmers still rely on Inca-inspired agricultural practices. The terracing methods the Inca developed are not just a historical curiosity. They are a vital part of modern Andean agriculture. These methods are still used to grow staples like potatoes, maize, and quinoa, which continue to be fundamental to the region's economy and diet. The Incas' ability to adapt their farming techniques to the diverse ecological zones across their empire, from the high mountain plateaus to the lush valley floors, is a testament to their deep understanding of the land, a knowledge that has been passed down through generations. Even today, the vertical archipelago model of agriculture, which the Inca perfected by cultivating crops in different ecological zones, is echoed in the way farmers the Andes grow a variety of crops at varying altitudes. The Incas' ingenuity in harnessing the natural world not only ensured the survival of their empire, but laid the foundation for the agricultural practices that continue to sustain the people of the Andes. Equally lasting is the Incas' architectural legacy, embodied most famously by Machu Picchu, the awe-inspiring mountaintop city that still stands as a symbol of their ingenuity, resilience, and mastery of engineering. Built in the mid-15th century under the reign of Pachacuti, Machu Picchu was not only a royal estate and religious site, but also a remarkable feat of architecture. The precision stonework, where massive stones are fitted together without the use of mortar, has baffled engineers and architects for centuries. The geometry of the site, the way it aligns with the natural surroundings, and the remarkable adaptation to the mountainous terrain all speak to the Incas' profound understanding of their environment. Machu Picchu, along with other Inca sites such as Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and Cusco, continues to captivate the imagination of millions of visitors from around the world. These sites serve as a powerful reminder of the Incas' architectural prowess, but they are also living symbols of cultural endurance. The techniques used to construct these sites, particularly the use of ashlar masonry, where stones are cut to fit perfectly without mortar, are still studied and admired. The Incas' ability to build structures that have stood the test of time, including enduring earthquakes and other natural disasters, highlights their mastery of construction. Even as modern Peru and other Andean countries grow and develop, the Inca influence on architecture is palpable. From the urban design of cities to the sustainable use of materials in modern buildings, echoes of Inca techniques remain a significant part of the region's architectural identity. While the Inca Empire itself may have vanished, the Inca spirit lives on in the modern Andean societies. The Quechua language, spoken by millions across Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Colombia, remains one of the most important legacies of the Inca civilization. Though Spanish is now the dominant language, Quechua continues to be the first language for many Andean people, preserving the cultural identity of the Inca through language, song, and tradition. In addition to language, Inca customs, religious practices, and festivals are still an integral part of life in the Andes. For example, the Inti Raymi, or Festival of the Sun, continues to be celebrated every June 24th in Cusco, where the Inca once performed ceremonies to honor Inti, the sun god. This celebration of the winter solstice is a reminder of the deep spiritual connection the Inca had with the natural world and their gods. It is not just a festival of the past, but a living, breathing continuation of Inca culture that ties the modern people of the Andes to their ancient ancestors. The Inca religion, with its focus on the worship of natural forces like the sun, the earth, and the moon, continues to influence the spiritual practices of many indigenous Andean communities. Though Catholicism was introduced by the Spanish, many Andean people still incorporate elements of Inca cosmology into their religious practices. Sacred sites once dedicated to the Inca gods, like Coricancha in Cusco, have been incorporated into modern religious rituals, blending the ancient with the modern in a seamless cultural continuity. The Inca system of governance, though shattered by the Spanish, also left a lasting imprint on the social and political organization of the Andean peoples. The Ailu, the Inca communal system that organized society around shared labor and mutual responsibility, continues to inform community-based systems in many Andean regions today. Collective decision-making and the importance of community cooperation remain key principles in indigenous governance structures. The Maitea system of labor taxation, which once required people to give their time and efforts to state projects, may have been co-opted by colonial forces, but its essence, the notion of communal labor for the greater good, still resonates in contemporary Andean society, particularly in agricultural cooperatives and community-driven projects. The Inca Empire may have fallen to the Spanish, but its legacy endures in profound ways. From agricultural systems that sustain millions to the architectural marvels that continue to inspire awe, the Inca influence is woven deeply into the cultural and social fabric of the Andes. Their innovations in agriculture, engineering, and governance still shape the way people live and work in the region today. The Inca were not just conquerors, they were visionaries, building a society that, in many ways, was ahead of its time. Their legacy serves as a reminder of the resilience and endurance of a civilization that, though defeated, could never be entirely erased. The Inca spirit lives on in the mountains of Peru, the highlands of Bolivia, and the valleys of Ecuador, as modern Andean people continue to draw from their ancient heritage to adapt to the challenges of the present. In the end, the Inca Empire's lasting legacy is not simply about what they built, but what they left behind. A blueprint for agriculture, architecture, and cultural preservation that continues to resonate with and guide the people of the Andes. The legacy of the Inca lives on, not just in the past, but in the living, breathing cultures of the Andean world today. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If you found this one captivating, you're in for a treat with the next one. It's just as fascinating, if not more, than you could ever imagine. Don't miss out. Click on the image on your screen now to dive into the next adventure.